Hello and welcome to the Rhythm Factory. I'm Eddie C, and together with my co-host Peter D, we're going to bring you in touch with people in and around the music business. This is the podcast that takes you up close and personal. Hi, and welcome to the Rhythm Factory podcast, the podcast that takes you up close and personal. To my right, my co-host, Mr. Peter D. My name is Eddie C. And did you see the, by the way, did you see the Grammys?
Yeah, I saw them, man.
Oh,
yeah.
We'll talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah, that would be nice.
In our show. Our special guest for today is a very, very talented and dear friend of mine for years. We've done studio sessions together. He's from Bakersfield, California.
That's correct, yep.
Please welcome our special guest, Mr. Marty Townsend.
Thanks.
Well, Marty,
happy to be here.
Yeah, great, man. I'm glad you can make it. And I know you gotta leave pretty soon for a gig, but we'll try to get our words in. You're coming, of course, from the States and having a bachelor's degree in music, but then living in Belgium for, I think, how long? That's been about
27 years.
27 years.
Yeah.
How did that all come about?
Well, we originally came to Belgium for my wife's job. Vicky, my wife, is a school teacher, and she's originally a music teacher also. And I had been traveling on the road a lot with a band, and in the States, traveling on the road is like being gone, you know. And she was naturally a little bit tired of that, and so she had this opportunity to. She applied for a job overseas through the American government, through the Department of Defense, teaching. And it's a system of schools all around the world wherever American military people are. And there's so she and they made her some offers, and I said, well, okay, I'll go, but I don't want to go to the jungle in Borneo or something like that, But if it's a reasonable place where I can play some music.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So after a couple of offers, the one came up where she is now, Shape Belgium, which is the NATO military headquarters in Belgium. Mm-hmm. So I thought, well, that can't be too bad. So Belgium, we got Brussels and Amsterdam and Paris and London's across the channel and Germany. Right. So pretty good central location. Let's try that. Exactly. So she originally had a 2-year contract, and I thought, well, that'll be interesting. We'll see if I can get some work as a musician. And if not, it'll be fun, a couple of years, and we'll go back home, and I'll get back into what I was doing. But in the first 2 years, I got in this band, Blue Blot.
Okay, yeah. Which
was at the time a really up-and-coming Belgian kind of rhythm and blues soul kind of band, and toward the end of that 2-year period, we got a record deal with BMG, and they asked me to do the producing, which was a big, good opportunity for me. So we were able to extend her contract, and then that's what we've done ever since. We basically keep extending. The funny thing is, it still feels temporary. Like we came for just a couple of years, just for an adventure in Europe, always with the plan of going back. But life's good here, and it got good for me, and she has a good job, and now we have a son who was born in here, and so.
Also very musical.
Yeah, he's quite a musical kid. Yeah.
You mentioned Blue Blood.
Yes.
I would like to know something about it, because you tell us that you are actually a producer, and you are quite important in musical leader, actually musical director. From 1990 to 1996, I believe you were really musical director for the band.
Right, I got in. The band actually already existed since 1986, I think, and but I didn't get in the band till 1990, I guess, the summer maybe of 1990 or somewhere in there, and and basically. They were a little bit leaderless. I think one of the guitar players who had left was more or less the leader of the band, and I just naturally said, wait, you're playing a minor chord and you're playing a major chord. Let's straighten this out. And then
so they open up your mouth and they say, hey, man,
thought I was Mozart or something.
Yeah. Right.
And so yeah, it just was a little bit of a vacuum that I fell into there. And then when the record deal came up, we didn't have a real big budget, and I had done some producing, so they said, "Why don't you produce it?" I said, "Okay," And that first one that we did, they had actually done an album before I was in the band called "Shopping for Love," that they did on vinyl originally, and just I think they only printed 1,000 of them and sold it. They were from Antwerp, and they had a big fan base there, and then but when I came in was when we got the BMG deal. It was a five album deal, which doesn't happen anymore. But
no,
it was
unfortunately, yeah.
And so I produced the first 3 of those 5, and then after that, they decided they needed a big name English guy, and but the first 3 sold much better than the expensive English guy, but who shall remain nameless.
But ever since 2008, you were also a musical director for an RTL broadcast called Televi.
Televi,
Can you tell us a little bit more about the difference between being a musical director for a recording act like Blue Blood?
Right. Well, in the case of Blue Blood, it was a band that I was in the band playing with. That was my main gig. So throughout the year, we would be touring and recording and writing songs, and so that wasn't. But the Televi program is just a one time a year thing. It's coming up again in April, and I'm not doing it this year because they asked me to, but I'm so busy with other stuff that because it's a big time commitment, because I write the arrangements, and I work out the band rehearsals and all that stuff.
So, arrangements are written out quite well, my friend.
Yeah, and so I just didn't have time this year. But I think it's like it was 7 or 8 years in a row that I did that, and that's a different kind of thing. It's just a one time a year thing that I do, and it was a nice project. It's a completely different thing. It's a TV show. It's a long TV show. It starts at 7 in the evening and goes till 1 in the morning or something. It's a live broadcast. It's a fundraiser thing for a cancer benefit, and so we play songs to back up some of the stars that come on. A lot of French stars come on, and but also we play like jingles, like going away to commercials. We play 30 seconds of this song, and then when they come back, we play 20 or 30 seconds, or we play what they call a tapis, the music under something going on, and so they give me a big long list of what they want, and then I have to work that out. And very often it's, if they only want 40 seconds, then I have to decide, well, we'll take 8 bars of the intro and then we'll go straight to the chorus, and I have to make a little arrangement too, so it's different kind of thing,
I know, I mean, we're from that old school generation, if I may say. Being on the road nowadays, of course, I think is much different than it was back in the days when you got on a bandwagon with the whole group and you just traveled. Well, how are you experiencing that these days?
In the big difference for me that's a big difference between the States and Europe, because in the States I was always mainly in one band. And if it was a band that was willing to travel, you could play every night with one band, but you're on the road all the time. So, and that's the tour bus thing, or
But you did a lot of clubs, or a lot of, was it casinos, clubs?
We did in different bands. We did all of that: casinos, resort hotels, nightclubs, all that sort of stuff.
And it was always whatever you got to eat from the. The whole thing. I know my experiences where you go on the road, and it was a lot of times it was the first hamburger joint.
We usually got different tours are different, but usually we got hotels and at least one meal a day, and then for the rest we were kind of on our own, the more known you are, and the more you can draw, and then the better the conditions get. So when you're starting out, you're in a Ford van and you're laying on the Hammond organ, you know, and we would stop at, you know, in happy hours, you know, in the States where they have two beers for the price of one, with a table with the, you know, snacks and things on, and we would stop places like that to eat. You know,
I say, here
but
comes
then
the band.
there was a TV show that was really popular in the States called Star Search. I don't know if you remember that show.
Yeah, I remember it.
And we were the band I was in at that time in the early '80s, or starting in about '84, I guess. We got on that show and we did very well. We got all the way to the semifinals. It was kind of like a forerunner of you know, the American Idol, but it was a little bit different because it was different categories. There was male singers and female singers, bands, comedians, dancers, and each week
total entertainment.
Program, each week there would be a new challenger to the, you know, and if you won, you came back the next week, and and we did very well. It was a band called Pressure Point, and after we were on that show, and it was like at that time 200 million people. I mean, 20 million people a week were watching that show. Yeah. So, you know, suddenly we were famous all over America, really. I mean, people were watching us on TV and following us, so that our money went up, the conditions went up, the hotel, we didn't have to share hotel rooms anymore, you know, so it's the better you are doing, the more, you know, crowd you can draw, then the better the conditions would get. But over here in Europe, the difference, for one thing, where I live, I'm living near Brussels, Belgium, there's so much work in a small area that you call it a tour here, but you go home every night. You know, after the gig, it might be a tour, but you go home. But in the States, if it's a tour, you're on the bus, and you're not going to be home for 6 weeks or something.
Exactly,
you know,
exactly. Yeah, that's true, because I know most you do tours, like, you know, you play, you know, you drive for 2 hours, and that was usually the longest distance.
Yeah.
And you would do your gigs, and you'd come back and you know, the whole Benelux area, you know. Yeah. And once in a while in Germany, you know, that would be
right. In Blue Block, we did some bus tours in Germany, where we were gone for 10, 12 days and on a bus. But that's the only band I've really done that kind of touring with in Europe. The rest of them, theater tours and things. Maybe if there's 2 or 3 nights in a row, we stay in a hotel and then go home or whatever. But it's not really extended tours like in the States, you know.
Yeah, we had those tours here in Europe as well. In
the old days,
my younger years, going through. You know, I played in a German band, and I played in a fusion band, which together with some Dutch musicians, and we stayed in, I mean, these little small, you know, bed and breakfast kind of settings, and it was on the road, and they said, "What are we gonna eat?" Food, you know. That was where whatever came our way, man. Yeah, that's right.
But you know, not only the conditions are different nowadays. Actually, we found out. You mentioned the Grammys, right?
Yeah.
I want to tap into that.
Yeah.
Just a little bit, because I don't know if you saw the Grammys.
A little bit. I saw about the last half of it, or
All right.
I missed the first part of it.
We both watched it, and we got to talk about it, and you know, we were quite disappointed, actually, especially by the younger generation of musicians, actually, because it seems to be that they're more about projecting an image instead of, you know, what it's about, the music and the feeling and all that stuff. And when you see the older musicians, they project something totally different. Look at Annie Lennox, for example. And we were wondering what your vision is about the music in the future, with all the manipulation possibilities in the studios, the fulfillment, the instant fulfillment, which we were actually, you know, talking about food, like it's more like fast food instead of a home cooked meal, which nurtures the soul.
Right.
How do you see the music in the future?
Well, that's really hard to say, but you know, the thing is. You know, I don't want to sound like some old guy about how good everything was, you know, back in the old days. but things change, huh? And it's a new generation. They have a different, but it has become very visual now, and that really started with MTV.
Yeah.
You know, it already 20-30 years ago with MTV, it was
Bubbles hit, video killed the radio.
Yeah, it was already because I remember my little niece back in the 80s. I came to hear a gig I did, and we played a song that was popular, and she said, "Oh yeah, I saw that song on MTV."
Right.
And now a song is something you see, you know.
Yeah.
But with the internet and everything, it's even become more that way. And now, in the old days, to get a gig, you had to make a demo tape. Now you have to have send a link to a video on YouTube or something.
Exactly.
You know.
Yeah.
So you're not going to turn that around. That's just the way things go, you know. But I'm a little bit optimistic that, and I have faith that the more things go in one direction, there's always a reaction.
Coming back.
So the more electronic and the more, I mean, that's interesting stuff, you know. And I'm not, but it's, you know, for me, the real live played, real human music and singing,
Nothing like
and
that
that's
human element, man.
and I find that the more things go that way, there's always this reaction. Like you have Mumford and Sons or this sort of thing coming up every so often, because it's like a little, it's like the kids are discovering acoustic music again, you know. For me, it never went away. I'm playing it every day, but it's suddenly, oh, that's something new, but it's not new. But anyway, it's a reaction back to that sort of thing. So
that's true.
I think you're not gonna turn around, technological progress. It's just going to keep going, and it's going to keep evolving. And the generation that grows up watching YouTube videos, you know, that's their world, you know, but they're like my son, for example, we were talking about. He loves like the old. He loves even 60s, but even old jazz is listening to, and Duke Ellington and things. But he loves the Beatles, and he you know.
Yeah, but you can't deny the roots of music, right? That's the whole point.
Yeah.
And the funny part is that we discovered that the reaction from the audience, if you saw the Grammys, is totally different. With, you know, let's say, for example, Annie Lennox again. She comes up with, I don't even know the other guy who's playing, but he's getting a response, and, you know, and then she comes on. Yeah. Of course, it's a name, you know, a big name, but she projects something else, and the reaction from the audience is so much bigger.
For me, here's another thing: is when I grew up, people our generation. There was no, even when I grew up, there were no DJs yet. So all music was live.
Yeah.
So if you had went to a wedding, or it was a live band playing, or a club, and the clubs had house bands where they had for dancing 5-6 nights a week. A band. I had a lot of gigs like that, and everything, parties, barbecues, everything was a live band playing.
Live music, that's right.
And so. In those days, if everybody was in a band and you could play all the time, and I think we got a lot more experience playing, actually, than young kids have now. I think they're sitting in their bedrooms or whatever, making videos to upload and stuff, but I don't think they get out and get the experience on stage playing like
not only that, just the experience of just experiencing life. Yeah. You know, period. I mean, you know.
Well, they're experiencing life. It's just a different life.
It's behind the screen or something.
But what I mean is actually performing for a live audience. We used to do that. I used to do that every night. You know, from the time I was about 17 years old, I was playing, 4 or 5 nights a week. You know, and that's a little bit. So these young bands, even the ones you see on the Tonight Show and stuff. It's like they're not seasoned professionals. They're not guys. Whereas it used to be, by the time you got on the Tonight Show, you'd already been playing in clubs and audiences for 10 or 20 years or
exactly. Yeah.
And now they go right from making their video to on stage and
World star.
and that's why like Annie Lennox. Oh yeah, she's a pro. Look at her. You know, she knows how to do this. And I think that's the difference, one of the differences maybe, but
well, like you said, the richness. I think the richness and the experience that the old artists have. I mean, because when some of the older guys came on stage, it was bam, and
but,
you saw
that's
the
that's
reaction.
a matter of experience and maturity, and that hopefully it'll happen for them too. But we shouldn't sit here and sound like a bunch of old guys.
No, it's not about it's not really about that, but it's basically about the pureness. I mean, even when I'm teaching my students, I got some very talented students that I teach sometimes, and I always tell them, I say, well, go back to the roots of the music,
and usually they do that. They do that, and they find they and then they find the roots of the because it keeps going back. You think the Rolling Stones did it, and then they got it from Chuck Berry, and he got it from T-Bone Walker, and it keeps going back.
So that's it. Well, listen, we're running out of time, and I know your time is also pretty valuable, especially now you've got to leave for a gig.
Yeah.
But before you go, we want to ask you: did you ever have like a awkward situation that you've been into?
Yeah, there's a lot of them. The really good ones, I can't tell here. They're not suitable for polite company. And also maybe not a good idea to commit them to the eternity of the internet. But there's a whole bunch. When I was about 20 years old, I moved to L.A. with some friends that I grew up playing with in Bakersfield, and we had a trio, and we were really good. Bass, drums, and guitar, and we all sang a lot of vocal harmony and stuff. And it was in L.A. It was a scramble to get gigs. So we would, and we did pretty well, but we hustled all the time. And one of the things we would do is we would call clubs, and then, like I say, in those days they still had house bands. Right. They would play anywhere from 2, 3 to 5 or 6 nights a week in the same club, and so we got a lot of those kind of gigs. And there was a club near where we were living in North Hollywood, and they had music, I think, 3 nights a week, and so we called the guy, and what we would do is, they had happy hours in those places, so from 4 to 6 or whatever, the drinks are reduced price, and they usually have a pretty good crowd in there. So what we would call and say, look, we'll come down and we'll play a set for your happy hour crowd, and if you like us, maybe you can consider us for the weekend gig or whatever, and. So there's this club down the street. We thought that'd be great. We wouldn't have to drive all over the place. We could get a steady gig here, and we'd be great. So we called the guy, and he said, "Yeah, fine, come next Thursday or whatever." And we did. So we get in there, we get set up, and the guy isn't there. The owner, let's say his name. I don't remember what his name was, but let's say his name was George, and so George wasn't there. The bartender said, well, he'll be back in a while. You guys want to wait a little while? It's okay. And so we waited and we waited. Finally, this guy comes over and he says, yeah, George, he got hung up, but he said I could go ahead and check you guys out. So why don't you play your set? And so we did. We got up and we played, and we killed, we were hungry, so we would get them, we were entertaining the people,
Yeah, indeed.
And we had a good set, and then we came off, and the guy came over and said, God, that was great, you guys are good, let's sit down and talk, so we sat in the booth. He came over, he had like a, yellow legal pad, so how much you guys want? Okay, and when can you start? And what's contact numbers? And okay, well, we'll be calling you, and so he goes back to the bar, and then we tear our stuff down. We're getting ready to leave, and then George comes up and he says, "Oh man, I'm sorry guys, I didn't make it back. I got hung up. I just couldn't make it." And we said, "Well, it's okay. This guy over here, he checked us out." So, and he says, "Who?" And we, this guy over here, and that's just some old drunks in here every day. you know. So that kind of stuff happened in L.A. all the time. Everybody's got some crazy angle, you know, and it's talking, you know, so some kind of hustle, and the guy totally conned us, you know, like he was some big shot, and he was nobody, you know.
Oh man!
So those things happened a lot, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Well, listen, buddy, we want to thank you so much for being on our show and sharing your experiences with us and of course with our public. If you want to know anything else about Marty, you can come to you can write us an email at the Rhythm Factory Podcast at gmail.com. Also, you can find us on Facebook on the Rhythm Factory podcast page. And please, if you watch us and you like what you see, hit the subscription button, click on like, and we hope to see you again soon. And this was it for this week. Remember, music is like food. You eat the right things, you'll be nourished. Take care.
Gotta
That's
eat.
it for this week. Gotta eat. That's it. Ciao.